So far, several efforts have been made to remove excess CO2 from the air by focusing on what can be done on land, such as growing trees or building direct air capture plants. Now, a growing number of scientists and even national governments have begun to look at the ocean as a way to remove carbon dioxide. What is upwelling? Upwelling happens when ocean currents push cold, deep water up to the surface. This happens as a result of the rotation of the Earth. The Earth spins from west to east. Earth's winds curve to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere. This is called the Coriolis effect. It helps bring deep ocean water up to the surface near coastal lines. The water that rises to the surface is usually cold and full of nutrients, like nitrogen and phosphorus. The nutrients come from the breakdown of dead sea creatures. Once at the surface, these extra nutrients are snatched up by phytoplankton, tiny photosynthesizing plants that float in the ocean water. What is phytoplankton? Phytoplankton is similar to land plants because they both use sunlight to make their own food through photosynthesis. They both absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen. Phytoplankton is especially good for removing unwanted CO2 in the air, which is then converted into sugar used to make even more phytoplankton.
Phytoplanktons are called carbon captures because even though they can capture as much CO2 as trees can, unlike trees that live for decades, phytoplankton can 1. Rapidly grow, allowing them to continuously absorb large amounts of CO2, and then 2. Only live a few days, then sink to the bottom of the ocean, taking the CO2 with them. Phytoplankton absorbs CO2 via photosynthesis. Plant detritus sinks. Carbon is transported into the deep sea. Phytoplankton only account for 1 to 2% of global primary producer biomass, yet contribute approximately 40% of global carbon fixation. Primary producer biomass: organisms that produce their own food through photosynthesis or chemosynthesis. Yet phytoplankton is responsible for nearly 40% of all photosynthetic CO2 fixation on Earth. Phytoplankton can replicate themselves once a week. The populations often grow quickly in upwelling areas, a phenomenon called a phytoplankton bloom. Phytoplanktons are eaten by zooplankton, microscopic organisms that gain their energy from consuming other zooplankton or phytoplankton, as well as small fish and crustaceans. These consumers are then eaten by larger animals, such as larger fish and baleen whales, which are predated upon by the top predators in the ocean: toothed whales, sharks, and seals. Through predation, the CO2 captured by the phytoplankton at the beginning of the food web remains in the ocean. What is downwelling? Downwelling is the process in which warmer surface water sinks into the deeper layers of the ocean. Wind blowing in the opposite direction pushes surface water towards the coast. As water piles up at the shore, it is forced down, creating downwelling. When surface waters sink due to downwelling, they carry dissolved CO2 with them. This process removes CO2 from surface waters, preventing it from easily exchanging with the atmosphere. Once in the deep ocean, CO2 can be stored for centuries to millennia, effectively reducing atmospheric CO2 levels. Downwelling can also happen off the coast. This occurs when surface water becomes denser than the water beneath it, causing it to sink. Ocean water increases in density when it cools or becomes more saline, which can happen in open ocean regions away from the shore, such as in polar regions or areas with high evaporation. The ocean covers 70% of the planet's surface and naturally absorbs 25 to 30% of CO2 released to the atmosphere by human activities. Upwelling and downwelling are significant contributors to this. How does artificial upwelling and downwelling help the environment? About 75% of the ocean lacks sufficient nutrients in sunlit waters to support phytoplankton growth. In contrast, deep ocean water is nutrient-rich. This led to the idea of artificial upwelling, pumping deep water to the surface to enhance phytoplankton growth and strengthen the biological carbon pump. Also, absorbing excess CO2 and heat is causing ocean warming, acidification, and oxygen loss, changing currents and nutrient cycling, and imperiling plants and animals essential to marine ecosystems. These changes are compromising the ocean's ability to provide food, support livelihoods, and insulate us from the worst effects of climate change. Artificial downwelling can help solve this. How do artificial upwelling and downwelling work? Artificial upwelling is a carbon removal technology that uses vertical pipes in the ocean to bring deep, nutrient-rich water to the surface, where it could promote the extra growth of plankton. Phytoplanktons tend to grow near coastal areas. The amount of oxygen in the ocean changes in different areas because of ocean currents. These currents help move and spread oxygen from the coast to the open ocean. Oxygen level around the coast tends to be higher, while oxygen away from the coast can be lower due to less mixing. The California coast, especially swirling water called eddies, help move oxygen and other substances across the ocean, especially near upwelling areas where deep water rises to the surface. Artificial upwelling can help with this. Low oxygen areas form at the surface because deep, oxygen-poor water rises up. At the same time, oxygen levels increase at the surface, creating a difference in oxygen levels between the oxygen-rich inner shelf and the low-oxygen offshore area. This difference is maintained by the upwelling currents but is also reduced by small, swirling water movements that mix the oxygen. These processes are controlled by wind patterns, which influence upwelling, and by how fast phytoplankton grow, which affects their concentration. Another set of pipes are used to facilitate upward flow and accelerate the transfer of carbon-rich surface water to the deep ocean. This process is known as artificial downwelling, when carbon is taken from the surface and sent deep into the ocean. Less CO2 stays in surface waters, which can slow down acidification near the top of the ocean. Record temperatures last year resulted in Greenland's third highest melt season and a 4% volume loss in Switzerland's glaciers. However, research reveals that there could now be a way to thicken Arctic ice. Theoretically, artificial downwelling could help with this. Artificial downwelling could be induced by pumps to artificially cool surface waters or increase salinity through thickening of sea ice. Artificial upwelling and downwelling remain theoretical, leaving their environmental impacts uncertain. However, changes in seawater temperature and salinity could affect phytoplankton communities and primary production. Additionally, temperature shifts may influence weather. Infrastructure could contribute to marine debris if damaged. Artificial upwelling and downwelling hold significant promise for addressing critical environmental and economic challenges. By stimulating primary production, artificial upwelling could contribute to carbon cleaning, offering a potential tool for climate change mitigation. Meanwhile, controlled downwelling may aid in carbon storage and help manage oceanic heat distribution, potentially mitigating the effects of climate change on marine ecosystems. While technological and ecological uncertainties remain, continued research and careful implementation could unlock sustainable solutions.